According to General Hospital teasers, Britt Westbourne appears to be ready to refuse Jason Morgan's escape assistance, insisting that she cannot leave her miracle medication dosages behind. What will Jason do if Britt rejects him and says she can't return to Port Charles? Anna Devane suggested that Britt may have been compelled into working with whatever project the Five Poppies Resort is a cover for. Because Anna is skeptical that Britt is there of her own free will, Jason is determined to investigate and, if necessary, save Britt. Jason will undoubtedly arrive at the resort shortly and expect to play the hero, but it won't be that simple. It appears like Britt has been obliged to contribute to this initiative in exchange for the miracle treatments she is receiving. In the August 11th episode of General Hospital, Pascal placed Britt's most recent medication dose in the lab to lure her to return. Of course, Pascal made it plain that if Britt does not complete her lab work and obtain findings, her medicine may be withheld entirely. Britt's medications appear to be a form of treatment for her Huntington's illness, therefore those dosages carry a lot of weight. Britt can't just walk away, so when they get back together, she might give Jason an update on the delicate situation. Despite Jason's eagerness to get Britt out of danger, he will understand what is at stake and may need to devise a different approach. Perhaps Jason will assist Britt steal the recipe for the wonder medication, so that it may be duplicated elsewhere. Jocelyn Jackson Vaughn's digging on the land could also be useful. Jocelyn saved Britt's life, and it would be good if she could repay the favor in some way. Whatever the case, Britt will have to return to PC at some point, so Jason may resolve to sort out this prescription situation and ensure that happens. According to General Hospital spoilers, Jason and Britt's reunion will be fraught with surprises, so don't miss out on all of the exciting news and romantic moments that await. According to the show's creators, Jason Morgan's pursuit of Britt Westbourne in Dubrovnik may take a deadly turn. What Jason doesn't realize is that confronting Britt may endanger other people. One in particular, who is very close to him. Soap Opera Digest reported, sparking a flurry of speculation online. As Jason comes in on Britt's refuge in the Five Poppies Dalmatia Hotel, viewers speculate on who will pay the price for their reconciliation. Is this Carly Spencer, Jocelyn Josh Jacks, or Danny Morgan? The writer's tease sparks wild theories. GH's writers delivered a bombshell clue concerning Jason's confrontation with Britt, and fans are deciphering every word, afraid it could mean tragedy for someone close to him. Jason's obsessive quest has led him to Dubrovnik, but the teaser hints that his actions could set off a chain reaction. Speculation is rampant. Might it jeopardize Carly, whose bond with Jason is unshakable, or Joss, who is currently immersed in her own WSB mission? Some supporters see Danny, Jason's son, as the susceptible target. The writer's words create a sense of impending danger. Will Jason's passion for Britt blind him to the risks? Who is the vulnerable person in Jason's orbit? Consider Jason breaking into Britt Westbourne's hotel room, only to discover that his actions have unleashed unknown perils. This week, the writer's cryptic warning has fans guessing that the one person close to him may be Joss, whose covert WSB position with Agent Vaughn may connect with Britt's secrets, or Carly, whose life Jason has always protected. The discussions rage online, perhaps over Danny, whose innocence makes him a prime target for almost any antagonist in Jason's circles. The tease suggests that the stakes are high. Will Jason's confrontation save Britt or ruin her? Will Jason's decision seal a tragic fate? The writer's ominous quote lingers over G-Hike like a thunder cloud, as Jason's pursuit for Britt threatens everything. Will his showdown reveal the risk to his close one, or will he prevent disaster? We have a feeling he'll be alright because he always is, but that doesn't mean Jason's mistakes have never hurt those he cares about. Britt sat in the dimly lit safe house, her fingertips tracing the edge of a worn metal table. The air was thick with the smell of antiseptic and rust, a weird combination that clung to the underground bunker's walls. Jason stood opposite from her, his figure clear against the flickering light of a single bulb swinging in the ceiling. His voice was low and urgent as he described his escape plan. He described a short window, a stolen vehicle, and a path through the wastelands that could carry them to escape. His normally steady eyes twitched with desperation, which Britt had never seen before. But she couldn't concentrate on his words. Her thoughts were elsewhere, anchored to the small, locked container on the table between them, its contents more valuable than any promise of freedom. The case contained her Elysium dosages, the miraculous drug that had kept her alive for the previous 3 years. It wasn't simply medicine. It was her lifeline, a synthetic connection to a body that would otherwise betray her. Without it, her health would worsen, with her organs shutting down one by one, like lights flickering in a dying city. The physicians had made it clear. Miss a pill and the clock will start ticking. The symptoms lasted 2 or 3 days before becoming irreversible. Britt had witnessed what happened to those who fled. Gaunt cheeks, shaking hands, and eyes hollowed by sorrow. She was not prepared to become one of them. Jason's voice pierced through her thoughts, sharper now. Britt, do you even listen? We need to move tonight. The patrols are preoccupied, and the border is less secure than it has been in months. This is our chance. He leaned forward, his fists gripping the edge of the table, his knuckles white. She could sense the strain in his posture, the weight of their circumstance bearing down on him. He'd been planning this for weeks, if not longer, putting together fragments of information from defectors and smugglers. The resistance had crumbled beneath the regime's growing grip, and this safe house, one of the last, would not remain concealed indefinitely. Jason was aware of the situation. Britt was also aware of the situation, but understanding did not alter the math. She looked at the case again. Inside were 7 vials, each containing a precise amount of Elysium, sufficient to keep her stable for a week. Beyond that, nothing. The regime controlled the supply, distributing it to those they judged deserving, a harsh leash disguised as compassion. Jason wanted to abandon the wastelands, which had no pharmacies, black market dealers, or a way to synthesize something as complicated as Elysium. Even if they made it out, what next? She would be exchanging one death sentence for another, slower and more agonizing. Britt, Jason whispered softly, sensing her uncertainty. I understand it's risky, but staying here is worse. They will discover us. You know what they do to people like us. He wasn't mistaken. The regime would not allow criticism, and their small group, smugglers, hackers, and dreamers, had been targeted for months. The safe house was a brief respite, a crumbling fortification in a fight they were losing. But the idea of leaving her medicines behind was like abandoning her own heartbeat. She shook her head, speaking barely above a whisper. I can't, Jason. Not without more Elysium. You know what happens if I don't take it. Her fingers closed around the case, the cold metal grounding them. She despised how weak she sounded, how fear stuck to her words like damp rot. But she was not ashamed. Survival was about choices, not pride, and she had made hers a long time ago. Jason's jaw tightened, and his frustration was evident. We can find more. There has to be a way. Smugglers, traitors. Someone out there must have it. His optimism was razor-sharp and reckless. He wanted to believe in a world where answers were always available, where hope could outrun reality. But Britt had spent far too long in the shadow of her sickness to indulge in such dreams. The black market was a myth, at least for products like Elysium. The regime had struck down severely, confiscating every known stockpile and executing dealers. Even if they located a source, the cost would be too high. More than their lives were worth. She returned his look, her eyes unwavering despite the quiver in her hands. You're asking me to stake my life on a maybe. I can't do that. Her voice cracked, but she persisted. You go. I will stay. I'll figure something out. Her words felt heavy and definite. She did not want to break up. Jason had been her rock throughout the tumult, pulling her from the ruins of their previous existence when the regime's purges began. However, loyalty could not override biology. He took a step closer, casting a shadow over the table. I won't leave you here. We're in this together. His voice was solid, but there was a plea hidden behind it, a fracture in his resolve. He grabbed for her hand, but she backed away, clutching the case to her chest. The gesture was spontaneous and protective, much like covering a toddler from harm. Jason's face sank, and for a moment the room became silent, the weight of their decisions oppressive. The safe house creaked around them, its walls straining from the weight of the world above. A faint yet distinct siren sounded in the distance. Jason's window of opportunity for escape was closing as time passed. Britt knew he wouldn't travel without her, unless she convinced him. But how do you persuade someone to abandon you? How do you convince them that your existence depends on remaining behind, even if it means confronting the regime's wrath alone. She placed down the case, pushing her hands to remain steady. Listen to me, Jason. You have an opportunity out there. You're powerful, smart, and have a strategy. But I am a liability. Without Elysium, I'm just dead weight. You know it. Her voice was now calm, as if she had accepted the inevitable. She despised how that sounded like surrender, which it wasn't. It was a straightforward strategy. She'd stay, hunt for doses, and possibly find a means to manufacture more. The safe house included a primitive but functional laboratory. She'd taught herself enough chemistry to survive this long. Maybe she could try it again. Jason shook his head, his eyes burning. You are not a liability. You're the reason I'm still fighting. His words struck like a fist, raw and unrestrained. Britt felt her chest tighten as a rush of remorse washed over her. She wanted to believe him and let his determination propel her onward. However, belief could not fill vials or prevent her body from deteriorating. She glanced aside, unwilling to meet his stare. The siren became louder and closer. Jason's head snapped toward the sound and his body tensed. We're running out of time, he stated quietly but urgently. He took a rucksack from the corner, which was already filled with necessities. Food, drink, and a battered pistol. He slung it over his shoulder and turned to her. His countenance a mix of determination and desperation. This is your last opportunity, Britt. Come with me. We'll figure out the Elysium thing together. She wanted to agree. Every part of her begged her to follow him, to believe in his plan, his hope and his unwavering determination to give up. But her gaze returned to the case, to the 7 vials that represented her single certainty in a world of maybes. She imagined huge, forbidding wastelands where even the strongest withered due to a lack of resources. She considered her body, vulnerable despite her resolve, and the ticking clock inside her. Survival was more important than freedom. I can't, she finally said, her voice scarcely audible. I'm sorry. The words hung in the air, as heavy as the dust motes spinning in the dark lighting. Jason glanced at her, his expression one of surprise and sadness. For a brief while she wondered if he would quarrel or try to drag her along. But suddenly his shoulders relaxed and he nodded, a single quick action that seemed like a door closing. He did not say farewell. He did not need to. The sight in his eyes spoke volumes. Grief, rage, and something softer that made her heart hurt. He turned and approached the hatch, his steps swift and deliberate. The siren was deafening now, a howl that signaled a pursuit. Britt saw him slip down the tunnel, the hatch closing behind him with a dull thud. The safe house fell silent, except for the hum of the bulb and a faint drop of water somewhere in the darkness. She sat there for a long time, holding the case in her lap and tracing the edges of the vials across the metal. 7 dosages. 7 days. Perhaps enough time to find more, outsmart the system and keep herself alive. Or perhaps not. The doubt gnawed at her, but she suppressed it. She had made her choice. Now she had to accept it. Or die trying. The safe house felt emptier without Jason, and the silence was louder than the alarm. Britt opened the case and examined the vials for the 100th time, as if staring at them might increase their number. She remembered the lab, the equipment she had scavenged, and the formulas she had memorized. There was a remote chance that she could manufacture more Elysium. She had done it before in smaller quantities using stolen reagents and a lot of luck. However, the regime had tightened its control on supplies, and luck was no longer a reliable currency. She stood, the case tucked under her arm, and approached the lab. The safe house was a tangle of passageways, each colder and darker than the next. Her footsteps echoed, a lonely cadence in the silence. She had no idea if Jason would make it to the wastelands, if his plan would work, or if he would ever forgive her for sticking behind. But she couldn't think of that right now. Her universe had shrunk down to the bottles in her hands, the lab equipment, and the dim hope that she could outrun her own biology. The lab was a tiny space filled with beakers, burners, and half-empty bottles of chemicals. A single terminal glowed in the corner, with a damaged but working screen. Britt placed down the case and turned on the system, her fingers working with accustomed precision. She displayed the recipe for Elysium, a complex series of molecules she had put together using stolen data. The dictatorship had locked down the recipe, but she had already cracked it. She could do it again. She had to. The siren had faded, leaving behind the faint buzz of the city above. Britt worked in silence, her head clear despite the exhaustion creeping into her bones. She measured, mixed, heated and waited, each step representing a small resistance against the inevitable. The vials in the case were her lifeline, but the lab represented her disobedience. She would not flee, hide or beg. She'd battle without firearms or plans, but with the only weapon she had. Her intellect, her hands, and the unwavering determination to remain breathing. Hours passed and night gave way to daylight. The terminal beeped, indicating that the first batch was ready. Britt held out a vial, and the liquid within caught the light. It wasn't ideal, but it was a beginning. She wasn't sure if it would work or keep her alive for more than 7 days. But for the first time since Jason had departed, she felt a glimmer of optimism. Not for freedom or escape, but for survival. For the time being, that was enough. Jason's quiet and slow voice broke the silence. You have one chance to tell me who is behind this, Britt. Don't waste it. His words were not a threat, but rather a guarantee. Britt's lips twitched as if she were about to laugh, but no sound came. Instead, she tilted her head, her dark hair reflecting the dim light. You think I'm the one making the decisions, Jason? You're not as brilliant as you think you are. Her tone was firm, but there was a trembling beneath it, a breach in her typical armor of confidence. She knew something, and Jason could tell by the way her eyes darted to the exit, like if she was planning her escape. But Jason was not about to let her get away. Not this time. The warehouse was a tangle of containers and rusting machinery, reminiscent of Port Charles's industrial heritage. It was the ideal location for secrets to be buried or exposed. Jason had followed Britt down after receiving a tip from Spinelli, who had been investigating her recent travels. The tech wizard had discovered a trail of encrypted messages connecting Britt to a shadowy figure known only as the Broker. The name had previously surfaced, linked to a series of incidents that had left Jason's allies reeling. Tampered medical records, missing shipments, and a near-fatal car accident involving someone close to Sunny Corinthos. Jason did not believe in coincidences, and Britt's participation was no accident. She had been overly cautious and deliberate up until now. Britt shifted her weight, her heels softly clicking on the concrete. Do you want answers, Jason? Perhaps you should search closer to home. Her comments were a jab, intended to throw him off guard, but Jason didn't react. He took a step closer, reducing the space between them. Who is the target, Britt? He inquired again, his voice colder now, each syllable tinged with barely contained rage. She caught his stare, her green eyes sparkling with what could have been fear or defiance. Do you think I'm just going to hand you everything? You do not terrify me, Jason. Not anymore. But she was lying. Jason could see it in the way her fingers curled around her arms and her breath hitched slightly. He had known Britt long enough to discern her tells. She was tough, no doubt. Dr. Britt Westbourne had worked her way through a life of treachery and sorrow, from her father's dark legacy to her own complicated relationship with the people of Port Charles. But toughness did not equal invincibility, and Jason understood how to push until the cracks appeared. He made another stride, filling the space between them. You're protecting someone, he replied, his voice hardly audible now. Or you are terrified of them. Which is it? Britt's composure wavered for a split second, her lips parting as if to speak, but she caught herself. Instead, she turned aside and took a few steps towards a stack of containers. You're too predictable, Jason, she remarked, her voice regaining its harshness. Always the hero rushing in to save the day. But what if the person you're attempting to save doesn't want your assistance? What if they are better off without you? Her comments impacted Jason harder than she had intended, and his thoughts turned to those closest to him. Sam, Carly, Sunny, and Danny. Who was she speaking about? Who was in danger? Jason felt a jolt in his chest as he remembered his son, Danny. The youngster was just 12, too young to get swept up in the evil that trailed Jason like a shadow. Sam had been fierce in protecting Danny from the life Jason led, but no one in Port Charles was ever completely secure. Not when people like Britt, or whatever she was working with, were messing with people's lives. Jason's palms tightened into fists, his knuckles darkening. If this is about Danny, he added, his voice low and threatening. You're going to wish you'd never crossed me. Britt's eyes widened briefly before she concealed them with a sneer. Danny? Do you think I would go after a kid? Give me some credit, Jason. But her tone was too light and forced, and Jason's instincts told him she was holding back. He did not have time for games. Every second he spent sparring with Britt meant someone he cared about was in danger. He grasped her arm, not firmly enough to harm, but solid enough to indicate he wasn't going to let go. No more lies, he stated. Who is in the crossfire? Britt halted for a time, her gaze fixed on his. She gently drew her arm away, her expression stiffening. Do you want to know who is in danger? Maybe it's more than one person. Perhaps it includes everyone you've ever cared about. Do you believe you can defend everyone, Jason? You cannot. Not this time. Her words stung deep, and for the first time Jason felt a shiver of doubt. Was she lying, or was the threat greater than he realized? The warehouse appeared to shut in on them, and the air became thicker with each passing second. Jason's mind raced as he pieced together the bits of his knowledge. The broker, whomever they were, had money, connections, and the ability to keep one step ahead. Britt wasn't the mastermind. She was a pawn, or even a hesitant ally. But why? What did she have to gain? Or do they lose? Her mother, Liesl Albrecht, had always been a wild card, and Jason couldn't shake the feeling that her shadow lurked over everything. But there wasn't time to pursue theories. He wanted answers now. Last chance, Britt, he murmured, his voice steady but firm. Tell me what you know, or I'll start digging. And you know how that ends. It was not a lie. Jason had previously toppled empires and exposed global conspiracies. If Britt was hiding something, he would find it at any cost. But the cost was what concerned him. Every move he took endangered someone. Sam, Carly, Sonny, Danny, and even Elizabeth, who was drawn back into his orbit despite her best efforts to stay away. Britt's expression softened for a moment, and Jason believed he saw regret in her eyes. You don't understand, do you? She spoke quietly. This is not about you. Not really. Before Jason could react, a metallic clang echoed throughout the warehouse, similar to a forced open door. Jason swung instinctively toward the disturbance, grasping for the revolver at his belt. Britt took advantage of the opportunity to back away, putting some distance between them. You should go, she continued, her voice anxious. They're already here. Jason demanded, but Britt had already moved, her heels clicking as she ran into the shadows. He cursed beneath his breath, torn between pursuing her and exploring the sound. His senses warned him that he was walking into a trap, but he couldn't leave without answers. The clang returned, closer this time, accompanied by the faint sound of footfall. Jason's grip on his revolver tightened as he approached the source, his senses on high alert. The warehouse's layout was confusing, and the weak lighting made it difficult to maneuver. Jason took stealthy steps, keeping his back to the containers and scanning for activity. He couldn't get past Britt's words. Collateral damage. Was she warning or ridiculing him? So who were they? Who works for the broker? Anyone else? His thoughts turned to Carly, who'd been looking into her own leads on a smuggling operation related to the docks. Had she come too close? Or was it Sam, whose private investigations frequently caused trouble? The possibilities gnawed at him, each worse than the next. As he rounded a corner, Jason noticed movement. A man sliding through a side entrance. Too tall to be Britt and too swift to be reckless. He followed, his boots silent on the concrete and his rifle lifted but steady. The door opened onto a tiny hallway lined with rusting pipes. The air here was cooler, wet with the odor of mildew and salt from the neighboring harbor. Jason's breathing was steady, and his concentration was unwavering. Whoever was here was not leaving. The passageway led to a smaller area filled with outdated machinery and stacks of wooden crates. In the center stood a man with his back to Jason, his shadow highlighted by a single overhead light. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and moved deliberately as he rifled through a metal case on a makeshift table. Jason did not hesitate. Turn around, he instructed, his voice cutting through the silence like a razor. The man froze and slowly raised his hands, turning to face him. It was not the broker. It wasn't anyone Jason knew. The man's face was rough and aged, with a scar down his left cheek. His eyes were cold and calculating with no fear in them. "You must be Morgan," he replied, his voice gravelly and with a faint accent Jason did not recognize. "Heard you were trouble." Jason didn't say anything, his pistol steady and his mind racing. This wasn't just random thug. This was someone who knew him, and they had been anticipating him. "Where is Britt?" Jason inquired, his gaze moving to the edges of the room, searching for others. The man smirked with his hands still up. "She is long gone. You're chasing ghosts, Morgan." The words hit more than they should have. Britt had tricked him, slipping away while he was distracted. But the man in front of him was not the true threat. Yet, the true menace remained out there, circling someone Jason cared about. "Who is the target?" Jason inquired, his tone low and each word thoughtful. The man's grin spread, but before he could respond, a piercing crack boomed through the room. A gunshot, close enough to make Jason's ears ring. He dove for cover behind a pallet, his heart racing as he searched for the shooter. The man had slipped into the darkness, but the danger was not ended. Someone was out there, and they weren't aiming at Jason. They were looking for someone he could not afford to lose. The warehouse seemed to pulse with foreboding now, with every creak and shadow representing a potential threat. Jason's mind raced through the possibilities. Sam, Carly, Danny, Sunny, and Elizabeth. Each name was a burden, a reminder of the cost of his life and his decisions. He went quickly and quietly, his revolver still in hand, as he maneuvered the maze of containers and tunnels. Britt's words rang through his head. Collateral harm. Jason would find whoever was in the crosshairs. And when he did, whomever was responsible would have to pay. The night was far from over, and the danger was just starting. Somewhere in Port Charles, someone close to Jason was running out of time.